How's everyone doing today? My name's Todd Clark, and I'll be bringing you the Battle of Oriskany. It was a battle fought between the Americans and the British during the American Revolutionary War on August 6, 1777, and it is actually one of the few battles that was only fought between North American citizens. The Battle of Oriskany is part of the Saratoga campaign. So, I want to give you a brief description of the Saratoga campaign so it all comes together. If you look on my map, it has a couple red dotted lines there, one coming in from the north, one coming in from the west. The one from the north is General Burgoyne, as he launched an attack coming out of Quebec, and his plan was to come all the way down across, coming in, meeting General Howe coming up from New York, splitting America, or the colonies, into two sides, dividing them in half. Now, from the west, as you can see, the second wave was to be led by Lieutenant Colonel Barry St. Ledger, and he was intended to move down the Mohawk Valley and meet Burgoyne's army near Albany. If you look in the right corner, I have Albany circled with a green circle there. Now, these armies would never meet up. Part of that reason is the Battle of Oriskany. Okay, I have brought up some basic statistics from the Battle of Oriskany. The American side was led by General Nicholas Herkimer. The Americans had roughly 465 soldiers. You can look at many different sites and you'll get different numbers. But on average 465, and they had 385 killed, with 50 wounded, 30 missing and captured. Now, the British side was led by Barry St. Ledger, who he was the force pushing in from the west. Now, he wouldn't actually fight in the Battle of Oriskany. It would be one Sir Johnson that would lead the army. He's actually a loyalist born and lived in America. Now, the British had anywhere from 28 to 158 soldiers. As you can see, it varies depending on where you're getting your research from. And again, with it being 28 to 158 soldiers that participated in it on the British side, you see the numbers fluctuate. 7 to 72 killed, 21 to 86 wounded. Now, one of the interesting things is when you do research the Battle of Oriskany, you will see that it is listed as one of the bloodiest battles of the war, which there was a lot of casualties and a lot of killed during the war. But when you research more of it, there are a lot more battles that had more casualties in it. So I don't know how it got the name the bloodiest battle of the American Revolutionary War. In fact, I was on one site where it listed the top 25 bloodiest battles of the war, and Oriskany was all the way down at 25. So if you do further research on this, you will see it is considered one of the bloodiest battles of the American Revolutionary War. It's a stat I actually disagree with when you're looking at a lot of the other battles. Every war story has their hero, and the Battle of Oriskany is no different. Nicholas Herkimer would be that man. He would be the brigadier general of the local militia, the Tyrone County militia to be exact. And he would hear the siege of Fort Stanowix is about 30 miles away from Tyrone County. So he would mount up the militia, and he would actually tell the Native Americans they should stay neutral for the war, but he would still have some of the local warriors with him. But he would never make it to Fort Stanowix, as he would be ambushed by loyalists and Native Americans that were sided with the British. These forces would be led by Sir John Johnson, and Herkimer would get wounded almost immediately. His horse would be shot out from underneath him, and he would be seriously wounded. But that didn't end his day, because he was propped up against a tree, as you can see in the picture. This is an artist rendition that came out years after the war, of him leaning against a tree and still directing his troops. And he would stay there for the battle. But the brigade surgeon, who would look at him and dress his wounds and move him onto a litter, he would after the battle, he would get pushed back when the Americans would flee. But 10 days after the battle, they would need to amputate his leg. Ironically enough, the same brigade surgeon that looked at his leg that day of the first day of the battle would be wounded later in the combat, so he would not be there for the amputation. But it was done by a much more inexperienced surgeon, and it was kind of a botched surgery. And he would later die from the wounds from the amputation. And on 16th August, he would die, which was about 11 days after the battle, and he would pass away at the age of 49. Alright, the battle would take place because Nicholas Herkimer, after he got his roughly 800 men and Native Americans rallied up and started moving to help the siege of Fort Stanwix, they would be ambushed later in the valley that they were marching in towards the base. Now, the Loyalists, led by Sir John Johnson, and they roughly think about 400 Mohawk Native Americans, led by Joseph Brand, would ambush the American soldiers as they were walking towards the base. Now, as you can see on the map, the blue boxes are the American soldiers and the black ones are the Indians and the Tories. Now, the Loyalists would be set up in front of the Americans. The plan was they were hoping the Americans would march into the Loyalists, and the Indians would be on both sides of the valley looking down on them, ready to open up on them once the Loyalists had opened. But before Herkimer's men could meet the Loyalists, the Native Americans started shooting at them, so not all of the convoy, or columns as you'd say, were in the kill zone yet, so many of them ran, and the Native Americans followed. But from here is where the battle would start, as the Indians would fire from the left and right, and you had the Loyalists coming in from the north. The Americans would lose the battle if you had to pick a winner and loser, because later, as you saw earlier, the 100 Loyalists and 400 Mohawks, it was mainly Native Americans in the battle. And as this battle was being fought, word got leaked back to the Americans about it, so more troops went and attacked the Native American settlement, which, once the Indians had found out their settlement was being attacked, they went back to that to protect their wives and children and property from the people attacking the now empty Native American base. And at that point, the Loyalists would push back from the battle. So if you were looking at it as a pure numbers battle, the Americans would have lost because the casualty rates were higher. But the British were the ones that pulled back. So you could look at it either way. I considered it a British victory. This is one of the most interesting parts of the battle that I find, the Native American activity inside the battle. It's actually started a civil war between the Native American tribes of the Six Nations. I may butcher these a little bit, but hopefully I get them right. They were comprised of the Seneca, the Cayuga, the Onaga, the Oneida, the Tuscarora, and the Mohawks. The British would have as many as 500 Indians, mostly Mohawk and Seneca, and they were led by Mohawk chief Joseph Brant. Now, the Americans did have some Oneida and Tuscarora fighting with them, but the interesting part is General Herkimer would actually tell the Native Americans that he felt they should stay neutral in this war. Now, we could actually see this battle being signs of foreshadowing of the American ways to come, because especially in the war in the West with the Native Americans after the Civil War, where we would use one tribe to turn on another tribe to get another tribe just to win wars against other Native American tribes. Well, here we had the six nation tribes, and they were, I guess you would say, at peace, if you can ever say that Native American tribes are at peace with each other. But by making them choose British or American, we're dividing the Indians not only against whatever side you wanted them to fight, as in the American or the British, but against other Native Americans. So now we have created a fight between the colonists and the British and the Native Americans against the Native Americans. So I just find it extremely interesting because, as I said earlier, this is foreshadowing for things to come later in the Native Americans as the colonists take up more and more land after they win the American Revolutionary War.